Hello again. World building. It's the cornerstone of epic storytelling. From D&D campaigns to legendary works like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, creating worlds is both an art and a challenge. But today, we're diving in how to build your own immersive worlds without falling into most common traps. Adventurers, let us begin. Let's start with a question. How many times have you started a campaign only to find your world falling apart before the first quest even started? If you're thinking, way too many times to count, you're not alone. Welcome to the Worldbuilders Paradox, making your world both complex enough to be interesting, but simple enough to actually finish. Too many cities, too many gods, and way too many subplots. But don't worry, we're going to fix that. Think of world building like a stew. Throw in too many ingredients, and suddenly we've got a flavor explosion no one asked for. Let's make sure we don't over-season this fantasy soup. Alright, first things first, what even is world building? In D&D and storytelling in general, it's the process of creating the setting, lore, and the environment in which your story and campaign takes place. Without it, well, you're just running a generic dungeon crawl and your players won't care much about the world they're in. Imagine if Lord of the Rings didn't have Rivendell, Mordor, or the Shire. Yeah, you're feeling that void, right? Tolkien made sure every corner of Middle-earth felt alive. Whether it was the peaceful green hills of the Shire or the dark looming towers of Mordor. But let's talk about why most world-building projects crash and burn. The number one mistake? Overcomplication. And I get it, you want your world to be deep, but there's a difference between deep and, oh, I've written 100 pages on goblin economics. Instead, focus on what your players will actually interact with. Do they really need to know the precise history of every village? Probably not. Just because you know everything doesn't mean your players need a history lecture every time they enter a tavern. So how do you keep it simple but effective? Let's break it down. The three core pillars of world building are history, culture, and geography. If you nail these, your world will feel alive without overwhelming you or your players. First up, history. Every world needs a little backstory, but don't go overboard. You only need one or two key historical events to shape your world. Maybe there was a massive war between two kingdoms, or an ancient cataclysm that reshaped the continents. Simple, impactful, and most importantly, game relevant. Next, culture. This is where you get to have some fun. Are there strange customs like dueling over trivial disputes? Is there a kingdom where everyone wears hats as a sign of status? It's the quirky, unique details that bring life to your world. Think about Tolkien's hobbits and their love for good food and simple living. A culture so well defined you can almost taste the second breakfast. And don't worry, you don't need to write an entire book like Tolkien did, but make sure your cultures feel distinct. A few well-placed quirks can go a long way. Now, geography. Your players are going to be moving throughout your world, so where are they going? Are they traversing vast deserts, dense forest, frozen tundras? Each location should evoke a feeling. Think about the mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings. As soon as the Fellowship enters, you feel the weight of the ancient dwarven halls, the darkness creeping in, and the forgotten history looming all around the group. Good geography isn't just a map with mountains and rivers, it's a mood. Use it to reflect the tone of your story. A cursed swamp or a peaceful meadow can say more about your world than a 10-page essay on elvish architecture. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, let's talk about what makes Tolkien's world building legendary. Middle-earth is detailed enough to feel real, but not so dense that it's unreadable. And the beauty? Tolkien used world building to enrich his story, not dominate it. We know the Shire because it's the peaceful heart of the world. Rivendell seemed like an ancient sanctuary. And Mordor? Well, you can particularly smell the pain and despair. These places tell you everything you need to know without giving a giant info dump. So, take a page out of Tolkien's book. Keep it immersive, but not too heavy. You don't want your players to feel like they need a PhD to figure out where the nearest inn is. Okay, so now you've got the basics. How do you bring it all to life? First off, engage your players. In D&D, the best worlds are the ones that react to the player choices. If they accidentally burn down a village, let them have consequences. Don't make your world static, let it evolve. Let your players feel like they're truly a part of the world, not just tourists passing through. Second tip, don't overplan. Yes, you need to be prepared, but you don't need to pre-write every possible event. Players will always do something unexpected. Let your world building serve as an outline, not a script. third tip. Borrow from the greats, whether it's Tolkien with Lord of the Rings, or George Martin with Game of Thrones, or your favorite D&D sourcebook. Don't be afraid to mix and match ideas. No world is truly original, and that's okay. What matters is how you bring it to life. So there you have it. World building doesn't have to be an overwhelming grind. Focus on what matters, keep it fun, and let your players or audience help shape the world as you go. Even Tolkien started with just a hobbit in a hole. Your world doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be yours. Have any world building tips of your own? Well, drop them in the comments below, and while you're at it, let me know what world building topic you'd like to see next. Maybe we'll dive into the finer points of creating a mythical beast, or how to avoid the dreaded all villains are dark lords trap. Until then, adventurers, like, subscribe, and happy world building!